And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Tonight's weather showing this low pressure area off the southeast coast. They're starting to pull back to the northwest, so that's going to keep the rain going tonight through tomorrow as that front weakens and passes up toward the coastline there. And as this low pulls back to the northwest, moisture comes across the southeast quarter of the state, dry in the west, all the way up to the Arctic coast. Just a couple of weak lows out here over the Bering Sea, not really amounting to too much, except for some rain here for the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. Low pressure weakens here along the North Gulf Coast with some leftover rain and showers for Thursday. For the south coast of the Panhandle, central and south coast, small craft advisory, south winds 25 knots for Wednesday, seas 12 to 13 feet, and east to southeast winds 15 to 25 knots for the north coast. Lynn Canal, a little breezy, southeast 20 with higher gusts, same thing for Stevens Passage. Clarence Strait, south winds 20 knots. And lighter winds coming up for the day on Thursday, just southeast at 10 for Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait, southeast 15 for Lynn Canal. And the central and south coast, south winds 15 knots. And for the north coast here, east to southeast winds 15 to 20 knots. Prince William Sound, light southeast winds tomorrow, and east 20 to 25 for the North Gulf Coast, variable 15 for the west side. Southwest 15 for the Barren Islands, light variable winds for Kamishak Bay, southerlies at about 20 knots for Cook Inlet. And then for Thursday, light northeast breeze for Cook Inlet at about 10 knots, east at 20 for Kamishak Bay, southeast 20 Barren Islands, and east for the western North Gulf Coast, southeast 20 to 25 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Prince William Sound looking at a predominantly east wind at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Kodiak Island for Wednesday, variable to southwest winds 10 to 15 knots, and variable to southwest winds 10 to 15 knots. Also for the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay looking at a west wind tomorrow at 15 knots with seas at around 4 feet. Those become east at 15 knots for Bristol Bay on Thursday, and south to east winds 15 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, south to southeasterlies for Kodiak Island 15 knots. Eastern Aleutians, west-northwest winds 20 knots for tomorrow, about the same here for Adak and Atka, and northwest 20 also for the western Aleutians. For Thursday, north to northeast winds 15 knots for the western Aleutians. For Adak and Atka, northwest at 15, and for Unalaska Island, variable at 10, and toward Nikolsky, northwest at 20. For the Kuskokwim Delta coastline, for areas south of Nunivak Island, I can say that a little better, west winds 10 knots, northwest 20 for the Pribilofs, and north 25 for St. Matthew Island. Light winds for the Yukon Delta coast, and light north winds at 10 knots for Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island. And for Thursday, St. Lawrence Island, pick it up to 15 knots out of the northwest, Yukon Delta coast, north at 15 knots, northwest at 10, south of Nunivak Island. Pribilofs northeast at 20, St. Matthew Island northeast at 15. Chukchi Sea tomorrow, north winds 20 to 30 knots, northeast 25 for the western Arctic coast, and for the central coast, all the way to Demarcation Point, light northeast winds. And then for the day on Thursday, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, northeast 10 to 15, east at 20 for the central coast, turn northeast at 20 on the west side for the Chukchi Sea, north to northwest winds 20 to 25 knots.